Hey, welcome back. So in this tutorial, we're going to start making our player and our player blueprint so that we can move around in our game. I'm going to break this up into a few tutorials, a few shorter tutorials so that it's not this long tutorial. But I guess what I want to start out with is explaining why we're using a rollerball instead of like a traditional humanoid type character because we have templates for those. And the reason is I don't want to get a very complicated character to make, but I do want to go through the processes of setting up your input system and being able to move and have the character do things in the world without having a very complicated character to create. Because if we're going to do a humanoid character, we also have to set up some animation blueprints. We have to get animations. We have to get the animations to work right. Skeleton things. So there's a lot of adjustments and things that need to be made to a humanoid character. Yes, there are templates that already have those set up in the third person, first person player, but then we would miss out on why we're doing the things we're doing or how the system works. So we're going to simplify the character down to a sphere and have an input system to control it and do some things in the world so that you understand how all of this stuff works together in making a game. And then in the future, I'll maybe make a tutorial about just a third-person character and the input systems and all that goes into setting up a character like that. But for this series, we're not going to get into that complicated stuff. We're just going to try to keep it a little bit simple, since this is presumably your first time making a game in Unreal Engine. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into what we're going to do. So again, we're going to make our player blueprint. Okay, we're going to add in all of these different nodes so that we can move, set up our input system and move, be able to jump, have a boost, and we'll get through all of that as we set our character up. Okay, we're going to be doing some of these setups first. So our input action. Okay, and so we'll get into that here in just a second. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up our project. So hopefully you still have your project. When you go to your library, right here in My Projects, your project should be visible. Okay. Another way to get to this is in your folder, right? So wherever you saved it. So if you're working off a separate hard drive or something like that, and you open up this and it doesn't know that you have any projects in there, it's empty. What you can do is you can go to where you have your project set up, right? And then go into that project, find the project folder for this. Presumably this is your first one, so you only have one. And I have my Rollerball 2025 tutorial here. We can also open it up by double clicking on this right here. Okay. And we'll also talk more about this folder and some of the things that when we may end up with some errors, if you lose part of your project, how we can possibly recover your project. But that'll be something for a future discussion. Okay, so now once I double click that, you see that my tutorial opens up. Here is my worlds. Right now we just have the old player position. Okay, and that cube that we put in last time. And that's pretty much it in our world. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started on making our character. But there's a couple things we need to do first, right? So I'm going to hit the content drawer. Now, last time in the tutorial, I told you to come over here to the settings button on your dock. So when we open up the content drawer, right here on settings, make sure you have your engine content checked. Make sure that is checked, because some of the assets we're going to use are inside of that engine content folder. All right. The other thing we want to do is, again, go to your content drawer. We hit this add button at the top. We're going to go to the second one down. So add feature or content pack. And we're going to add the starter content. When it first opens, you can see if you wanted to add in some templates, here they are. Some C++ stuff we're not going to do. And then a content folder right here. So if you click on content, here's the starter content. We're going to select it. We're going to add that to the project. The reason why we're doing that is it has some assets in it that we're going to want to use. And those would be our materials that we're going to use initially to set up our character. Okay. And then there's some other things that we're going to pull out and use as we move along. Okay. And we'll go through those folders in the future when we need to. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this one. Again, that says content browser, but that is also your content drawer, which is this down right here. Okay, this one right here, we can just close it out. All right, so now we've got that started. Let's go back into our content drawer, all the way up to our content level up here at the top. We don't want to be in the engine content because the engine also has a content folder. Make sure you're on the content folder underneath all, so that when you look at it, you should see content, and then inside that content, if you open it up, you should see your levels folder that we made, and then the starter content that we just added in. All right, we're going to right click. We're going to add a new folder, and we're going to call this one Blueprints. This is where we're going to put our blueprints for our game, so we can keep track of where they're located. When we import other assets that may have blueprints with them, they're going to be in those asset folders. We don't want to get them mixed up. There'll be a ton of stuff in there. So if you double click on that folder, and actually, let me go back up to content. So I changed the color. I don't even know if I talked about it. So right click on it, go here, go to set color, click new color. Okay. And then you can change the color to blue. I picked blue in order to keep track of it for blueprints. Okay. I think it automatically did that to me because, again, I was testing a couple things out in this before we started. All right, so double click on that folder, right, and then right click in here. We're going to add another new folder, and we're going to call this one player. Now, there's not going to be a lot of stuff in here, so I'm not going to change these colors or color code these, but you can if you wish. All right, so I'm going to double click on the player folder and go into that folder. So now we should be down into our player folder. I'm going to right click here. This is where we're going to make our first blueprint, okay? So I'm going to select, once I right click, this window will open up. We'll have a bunch of different choices in here. We're going to pick this one right here, blueprint class. Okay, so we're going to add a blueprint. A blueprint is basically a program that allows us to set up an item in our world to do something. Okay, sometimes it's just to hold some things together so that they're all one piece, and it does really nothing other than that. Other times it has, like our player, a lot of functions added into it so that it does stuff when we put input, okay, and we move around. Now, when we first open this up, you'll see that there's some other choices in here for different types of blueprints. At the very top is actor, okay? So basically, this is something that we're going to have perform a function inside of our game. So like a volume where if you enter into it, you get killed, or it does damage to you, or you get some health restored, or you can pick up a coin. It can be a pickup. It can be all kinds of different things. But it's a pretty simple interactive piece. We can have a lot of complicated blueprints running it, but it doesn't really, you don't control it, okay? A pawn is something that we can possess, so it can be possessed. It's an actor, so it's an actor. That can be possessed, okay? And it receives input from a controller, okay? So that is basically not a character. It's a step above a character, but also in complicatedness, I guess it's a step below. Because when we talk about a character is actually a pawn, because again, a pawn is something that can be possessed and receive input, but this one character has the ability to walk around, okay? It also has some presets in it that allow it to do that, like a movement control system. But this time around, because we're keeping this simple, we're not going to use a character. Okay, then there's some of these other ones, player controller. We're not going to be using that much. We will possibly set up our own player controller later on. We will use a game mode at some point, but really, we'll go over some of these things as further and more in depth as we get to them. But that's kind of the over high level view of what these things are. All right, so what we are going to do, though, is we're going to pick a pawn because we want to be able to possess it, and we're going to use a controller to control it and move it around. So we're going to pick that, okay? Now, with it, we're going to type in BP underscore, and we're going to call this player, okay? Now, if for some reason you accidentally clicked off of it and you can't get it back open, you can click in here sometimes, a few times, and it'll pop up. You can also just select it and hit F2 to change the name, and then hit enter, okay? You notice there's a little asterisk right here. It's because it hasn't been saved. And as I hover over that, you can see on that menu, third thing down, it says asset has unsaved changes. We just created it. We haven't done anything with it. But at the very top, it tells us the name of this. It tells us what it is. It's a pawn. Okay, it's a blueprint, and it's a pawn. It tells us where it's located. It's in our game, in our blueprints, under player folder. and it gives us some other good information about it. Okay, parent class is a pawn, and we'll get into parent classes a little bit down the road. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit save all. So file, save all. We've done a couple things, and when we do that, you'll see that that asterisk goes away. Okay, now we're going to double click on this. Okay, and open it up. Not much in here right now, right? Pretty simple. So let's talk about some of the things that are in here, okay? We have our title here. So under components, this is the name, this is the blueprint, okay? Then underneath that is the default scene, which is this little thing right here. You can't really interact with it or move it around. It does have a scale, but it doesn't really matter much. So it's visible, it's not hidden in the game. So there's some things under the details section about this root, but we're going to end up getting rid of this root because we're going to use the player as the static mesh for the player as our default scene root. So it's going to be our root instead of this, okay? So what else is in here? All right, so up at the top, save. We can search folders and browse it. There's a compile button. We're going to be using the compile button. Every time we make a change to this, we're going to need to compile it before we run it. Okay, we can find, this is where we can change our class settings, and there's class defaults. This is what we're in right now is class defaults. Okay, so if you ever get lost in this, click on class defaults. That's where we're at. This would be class settings. Again, here's the parent class as a pawn. We can change it through this process right here, but we're not going to do that. We can run a simulation for it, and we can also hit play from here. Our components, these are the things that make up our player or our blueprint in here. So any of the static meshes or any of the other items that we add into it will show up here. Okay. This is the blueprint. So again, event graph. When we take a look at the top here, there's viewport, construction scripts, and event graph. So event graph is this right here. We see that there's it's called the event graph, and then underneath it is event begin play right there. Event actor begin overlap and tick. Okay. Here's the construction script. So that would be this one right here. There's nothing in there. We can add macros, which we're not going to do right now and probably won't for this game. And then we have variables that we can add in. It also tells us our components. So if I click on this, this is our scene root. This is what is in the components right now. As we add things, some of those will show up over here as well. And we're also going to add some other things to our section over here for my blueprints underneath this as we go along. And as we do that, we'll pay attention to that stuff there. All right. So first things first, let's go ahead and add a static mesh here to our player. So we're going to come up here to the add button. And when we hit that, we get a drop down menu. It's searchable. So if you need to find something and it's not visibly visible right away, you can type it in here and you can type in static mesh, for example. But here, because it's used common, static mesh is right here. All right. So we're going to just click on static mesh, and I'm going to change the name of this to player. Okay. Now over here on the right-hand side, information about it. We have location, rotation, and scale. So these are our transforms. When we talk about transform, we're talking about all three of these. When we're talking specifically about location, we're talking about its geographical, its coordinate location in the world. Same with rotation. And then also we're talking about a scale. We'll get into some of this other stuff as we move forward, but we are going to get into static mesh, okay? So initially, let's go ahead and right here where it says none, hit that down arrow and type in sphere, okay? When you do that, you're going to end up with a bunch of stuff show up over here because it has sphere in the name, and it's in alphabetical order. What we're going to want to use is this right here, the very top one that says sphere. So if you hover over it, it should have the path engine meshes. Okay, that's why we added in our engine so we can have access to these. Some of these other ones might have the same thing, but we're going to pick this one, the very top one. I'm going to select it, and it should pop up. There it is right there. So if I scroll out a little bit, I was zoomed way in. Here's the sphere right here in the world, okay? Now, I will tell you from already working on this game a little bit that this mesh is going to be too big to fit through the doors, and it's kind of a large player. I wanted to shrink it down just a little bit. Normally, I go through discovery for learning, so we would have put it in the world and discovered that. But since we're here now, and when we change a parent, it's also going to change the children that are underneath it. So when we look at this, these are our parents, and these are children. So anything that's under this is its child. So default scene root, this is the child player, okay? The first thing I'm going to do with this child is I am going to promote it. I'm going to pull it up and drag and drop it on scene root, and we're going to get rid of that. So now this is our scene root. If you notice over here in the transform, we can only change the scale now. We can no longer change anything else. Okay, with this lock right here, it's probably default unlocked on yours. I'm going to click on it. So now, whenever in the future, no matter what I changed, their scale is going to change all three of these. If I change one, all three will change in equal to this right here. Okay. If you want to just change X, Y, or Z, you would have to unlock it to do that. So I'm going to change this to 0.7. What did I do? 0.7. Wow. Right off the bat, I'm proving how good of a typist I am. All right, so there we go, 0.75. Okay. Now, if we take a look underneath that, we also have this thing called mobility. We want to make sure it's movable because this is going to be a moving object in our game. If it's set to static or stationary, it's going to cause some problems for us, and we don't want to have those problems, okay? It won't move, and we get some errors thrown up because we're going to try to move it, and it'll tell us we can't. So make sure it's unmovable, and these have to do with basically how light is rendered and shadows are rendered, okay, in our game. And we can talk about that later if it becomes important. All right. So now our player is initially set up. I'm going to compile it and save it. Okay. With it selected, the player selected, we have this material slot over here. And if it's closed on yours, you can just hit that little arrow right there and open it up. And we're going to try to find the material. Now, that starter content that we opened up initially, if we go into our content folder, go to the starter content folder, and inside here, we'll see that we have a bunch of folders. One of them is called materials. Now, this isn't a ton of materials, but there's a few. And we're going to pick something to kind of just start off with so that it doesn't just have this boring gray patchwork here. So I'm going to, again, like in my demo, I'm going to pick this one here. Okay, and now there's a couple different ways to get it over here. We can click and drag it, okay? And that little blue line should pop up like that, meaning that, yes, it's okay to put it there. Okay. Another way to do it is to select it here in the world. So if I selected this one next to it and hit that arrow right there, it'll change it to that. Okay. Once we have something in these, and we're not sure where it is, but it's important for us to go find it because maybe we want to duplicate it or we want to do something else with it, maybe apply it to a different blueprint. There's this little folder here with a magnifying glass on it. If we click on that, it'll take us to where that's located. And you can see right here, my sphere is located in my content, engine meshes, okay? And that one's going to be okay. We'll have to see how it looks in the world. I was actually expecting it to be a different one. I don't know why it's that one. Click on that one. Yeah, actually, my bad. This is the one we want, okay? That was why it was so huge. So the one we're going to want is, I'm glad this actually accidentally happened so that if it happens to you, you can look and see if it is, okay? So if I hit the Control Z button here, so Control Z, this right here is going to be massive. See how much bigger it is just in the viewport? I haven't even moved it. Okay, and if you hover over it, it's going to say that it's an engine meshes spheres, right? So if we hit this down arrow again, we're going to see that some of the spheres are here. Select this next one. So if I hover over this one, it should, it's not going to tell me. I'm going to click this next one, okay? Click on it, and it's going to shrink it down. Now, if I hover over it, it's going to tell me that it's an engine basic shapes sphere. That's the one we want, okay? Engine basic shapes sphere, and to double check to make sure, we're going to click on that little folder right there. And it should have a cone, a cube in it, cylinder. So there should be some other things in there. We want to make sure we have this one so that it's actually the correct size for our game. The one I had selected initially was not. And it's weird because that's the first time that's happened as I was going through this. So good that it happened now so we can talk about it. All right, I'm going to hit compile again and save. So a couple more things we need to do before we finish up this tutorial. We're going to add in a spring arm, which is what mounts our camera, and we're going to add in the camera. So let's go ahead with the player selected. I'm going to click on add, and I'm going to type in spring, okay? And a spring arm should come up. And I'm just going to leave its name spring arm because that's what it is. And the scale on it, for whatever reason, even though we added it after we've already adjusted our player, the scale's coming in kind of wonky on me. It may not. If it says 1 on yours, you're okay, but mine says 1.33333. So I'm going to hit this little arrow to the right and reset it to its default values. Okay, and now it's set to 1. Didn't really change it much, but it might cause an issue in the future. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and compile, save that real quick. All right, so for my player, for the spring arm, I'm going to set the camera out a little bit further so we can adjust the length of the spring arm right here. We don't want to use the scale to change it. We're going to use the spring arm length right here. Okay, and I'm going to change it to 400, push it out just a little bit. Now to move around in this, again, right mouse button, you can look around. Left mouse button, you can pull and push forward and backwards. You can kind of go around like this if you hold both of them together, all right? Just like in the viewport, okay? And then you can also use the WASD to move around and fly around in here, but you might get lost because just the way it's set up. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a camera. So select the spring arm. We're going to add in camera. Okay, so camera. We're going to pick the top one, just camera, none of these other ones. Okay. And I'm going to go to the front of that, and I'm going to call this player underscore camera, because later on we're going to be making references to it, and we don't want to get confused with other cameras that are in the scene. So we're going to make this one, we're going to give it a name that we know is ours. And I'm going to compile and save it to... So on the spring arm, I'm going to go back to the spring arm. And the reason why I added the camera before we made some more modifications to the spring arm is so that you can see it happen. So right here for the socket offset on the spring arm for the Z, so this is X, Y, and Z, I'm going to type in 45. I'm going to give it a slight angle above my ball so that I'm looking kind of over it, but the camera is still looking forward. If you wanted to change the rotation on the camera, or you wanted to change the position of the spring arm, which because of the way we're going to set this up, I wouldn't recommend changing the position of the spring arm. We want the spring arm to be centered, but we can change the offset. So you can move this up and down so you can make your camera go higher if you want. Okay. You can also change the rotation on your camera right in here by selecting this. And if I wanted to maybe put this at 20 degrees, for example, it would cause my camera to rotate. Okay. I'm going to leave it at 0 because I want it to look forward. Negative direction will make the camera look down. If you did move things, you want it to look down a little bit more. So like a negative 20, make it look down. Okay. Again, I'm leaving mine the way it is. I'm going to compile it. I'm going to save it. Now we're going to jump into the sandbox real quick. We're going to go to our content drawer. Right here, we're going to select all. And we're going to go into our content folder right here. Not the engine content folder, because if you look, the engine also has a content folder. We don't want that one. We want our content folder because we're going to go into our blueprints, to our player. We're going to click and drag and drop our player into the world. Okay. And I'm going to uncheck my grid here so I can pull him up just a little bit. You can see the camera right there, right? So the camera is looking through this. I actually feel like the camera is maybe a little bit too far back. So if I go back into my player, select the spring arm, I am going to change that back to 300 and see what that looks like. Hit compile, save it, go back in, and I think that looks a little bit better for me. I like that a little bit better. But you can play around until you get the look you want. Not that you're going to be able to do much with this right now. All right, so if we were to hit play right now, we're going to see that we're actually inside of that original default player. We have not possessed our player, which is over there. Instead, we're over here in this little sphere thing. And if I hit F8, you can see we're still this player right here. So if I hit F8, I can hit the stop button. If you have not, you can also hit the escape button to stop. Okay. And we're going to get out of that. So how do we fix that? I'm going to go to BP player. I'm going to go back into my blueprint. I'm going to select the top one up here. Okay. So the BP itself at the very top. And there's this thing called possess, and let me see where if I can find it. Oh, here it is. So under pawn at the very top, okay, when we click here under pawn, very top, we can see that we auto possess player is disabled. Auto possess AI is when it's placed in the world. We have some options there. So if it's spawned, or it's placed in the world or spawns. We could, pick one of those, but we're going to leave it placed in the world for right now. And then AI controller class is this the AI controller. We're going to leave that alone. And right now we have no input override. So in order to get this to possess our player, right now it's disabled. We're going to select player 0. Okay. Later on, we're going to put this back. But for right now, just for simplicity's sake, we're going to go ahead and do this so that you understand what this does and where it's at so you can possess different players if you wanted to as you're developing. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit compile. I'm going to save it. Now if I go back into the world and hit play, there I am. I'm right behind my ball, but I can't do anything. There's no movement. We haven't done our input yet. All right, so that is it for this tutorial. We have got our player started. We put it in the world and we're able to possess our player. Next tutorial, we're going to make it so our player can move. So we're going to get into the input system in the next tutorial. Again, if you have any questions, something didn't work right for you, put it down in the comments. I will answer you. I will be checking these and get back to you. If you have any other comments, please also put those down there. Again, like my video, please, if you liked it. And if you haven't already and you want to follow along with the tutorial, go ahead and subscribe to my video. Had a senior moment there for a moment. I couldn't remember the word. So anyway, go ahead and like and subscribe my video, and I will see you next time.